Heyo, welcome to the Quniverse. I'm your host Q, and welcome back to Zero to Dread. So the last time I covered Metroid for the NES and gave my honest thoughts about it. So today, we'll be continuing our journey on covering every 2D Metroid with Metroid 2 The Return of Samus on the Game Boy. Just like the first Metroid, this will be my first time playing it. Safe to say the only games I played before making this series was Super, Zero Mission, and Dread. Everything else is an entirely new experience. Metroid 2 marked the return of Nintendo Research and Development 1, or R&D 1 for short, the team behind the original game as they took another shot at continuing Samus' Arin's story. Produced by the late and legendary Gunpei Yokoi, the sequel arrived 5 years after the original, this time on the Game Boy. Following the events of the first game, Samus is dispatched to planet SR-388, the Metroid's home planet, on a mission to eradicate the remaining Metroids and prevent them from falling into the hands of the space pirates, or at least that's the gist of what the manual says. There were quite a few changes made to transition into this title, but I'll cover them as I go. So just like last time, the game just jumps right in and you'll notice a few things right off rip. So first things first, since it's on the Game Boy, the screen crunch is immediately noticeable. Not horrible, but just something to note. As for another thing, you actually start off with missiles and the Morph Ball already, which saves you a trip of having to look around for the Morph Ball. There's still more missile expansions, so keep an eye out for that. The last thing is now the Metroid counter on the bottom right. There are 39 Metroids in total you will have to eliminate, so each time you kill one, the counter will go on a fritz, then reduce the number by 1. So the movement of this title feels a lot smoother than the first game, but still feels a tad clunky. I never mentioned this in the last video, but Samus felt really slow to move, and whenever there were multiple enemies on screen, the game would begin to chug like hell trying to render it all. Thankfully, this title is nowhere near as bad as when it comes to this sort of thing, but still somewhat there. Another huge change is that you can now crouch down to hit enemies that are on the ground, and when you jump, you can now aim downward. These may feel small, but when you play the first Metroid then jump to this one, the changes are night and day. You can now also save with save stations that are spread out throughout the game. Nowadays, that's not really noteworthy, especially with save states being so huge, but for 1991, this is huge, and definitely appreciated in a title like this. So now for the things that haven't changed. Unfortunately, just like the first one, there's still no map, so you know what I'm gonna say. You could try to navigate yourself, or just do what I did and load up that map online. Link in the description below for the map I used. Thankfully, due to the hardware, the game is definitely more forgiving as far as where to go, though since most areas are blocked off until you kill a certain amount of Metroids, it's way more linear than the first game, but even still. These layouts are exactly the same color and it can get really confusing. It's even worse if you aren't playing the Game Boy Color version. I totally get the map is more so a me thing for this title, but it's just something I do prefer in this franchise. SR380 is divided into 10 sections, but unlike the first game, these areas aren't uniquely themed or clearly separated. Instead, they blend together and feel more like parts of one massive interconnected environment. The game steadily pushes you deeper and deeper into the planet as you progress. You can push through even without a map, so it's definitely simpler than the first game on that part, but I'd still recommend a map personally. I'm gonna be honest, due to the hardware limitations, SR388 area-wise comes off as really forgettable. The only thing that sticks out is the music, which is surprisingly good, at least the surface level theme. I'd give the music more praise, but watch what happens when you go deep into a specific area. Yeah, there's no music at all, which really sucks me out quite a bit, but it'll signify that you started a new area, I guess. There's a few other soundtracks, but they're really unremarkable, except for one, but I'll dive into it a bit later. I didn't exactly go over the OST in the first game, really because I think it's fine, but later installments definitely remix those soundtracks a lot better, but I digress. Essentially, the gameplay revolves around exploring until you find and eliminate a Metroid. You wipe out each Metroid of the section that you are on, and then the screen would begin to shake, signifying a new area has opened. However, unlike the original game, the Metroids in this installment are much more distinct. They come in 5 different evolutionary variants, each with unique behaviors and increasing difficulty. Alpha, Gamma, Zeta, Omega, and the Queen. The Alpha Metroid is the most common ones you'll fight for the early game. So this Metroid will just dive at you to do damage, but they won't try to drain you of your energy. Instead, it's more so studying their patterns and trying to take them out. These Metroids take 5 missiles to kill. Each Metroid is pretty much like this, but other variants just deal more damage and take more missiles to kill. The Gamma Metroids are the second most common variant you'll face and are easily a tougher, upgraded version of the Alphas. They take about 10 missiles to kill. While they don't fire projectiles, they emit a dangerous electric aura that damages Samus on contact, making close combat riskier than with Alphas. The Zeta Metroids are the first truly tough enemies you'll face. They can only be damaged by missiles fired directly in front or behind them. Shots fired underneath won't hurt them at all. This is especially frustrating because they often move just out of range before quickly diving into attack. On top of that, Zetas have a short-range plasma breath projectile, which is a unique challenge compared to earlier Metroids. Since every other Metroid can be damaged more easily, this requires you to adapt your tactics. Fortunately, there are only 4 Zetas in the game, but make no mistake, they're serious threats and take about 20 missiles to kill. The Omega Metroids are easily the toughest enemies you'll face up to this point. When you see one, it's instantly on sight. These behemoths only have weak spots at the front and the back. Anywhere else, they'll just tank your missiles like it's nothing. They hit like a truck, with massive damage from both their huge body and their fire breath attack. It takes around 30 to 40 missiles to bring this one down. There are only 4 in this entire game, but each one is a serious threat. If you're not prepared, you're cooked. I'll save the Queen for a bit later. So as you know, you got your Morph Ball, Missiles, Bomb, Charge Beam, Screw Attack, Wave Beam, Ice Beam, and Variosuit. Those much haven't changed. Well, the Variosuit aesthetically looks different since in the first game it changed your entire suit color. But in this title, since the entire game was initially monochrome, they had to redesign the Variosuit to make it stick out, which is when they added the bulky shoulder pads to it. The devs were low-key in their bag with this one because it later on would become her signature design from this point onward. Okay, so there's one more difference, and that's the fact that your movement speed is slightly increased when you get this power-up, but I actually didn't know that until I looked it up. So for the new power-ups this time around, we got the Spider Ball, Spring Ball, Space Jump, Spazar Laser Beam, and the Plasma Beam. The Spider Ball, when used, will change Samus' Morph Ball aesthetically and allow her to stick onto any type of terrain. You get this power-up really early on, and its main purpose is to climb to unreachable areas. Just know if you use a bomb or get hit while using this, the Spider Ball will be knocked off and the power-up will stop being active for a second or two, so be careful of that. Honestly, I really like this power-up and I wish we got to see more of it. The Spring Ball allows Samus to jump on Morph Ball form. It's a very simple, yet very effective power-up. Bomb jumping is very finicky in this game, so having this power-up really helps with getting to slightly tough areas which you know you'll need to do throughout the game. Not much else to add here. It's good. Now the Space Jump is a godsend, but it's tricky to fully utilize it. The Space Jump allows Samus to jump infinitely, but the timing is really strict. So what I figured out is that you want to jump right when the initial jump reaches its limit, or after a couple seconds into the initial jump. But if you master this, you'll be flying through a lot of these later areas, especially since you'll need it in the latter half of the game. It just takes some practice, but I'm sure y'all can get used to it. The Spazar Beam, when used, shoots 3 wide-angle beams simultaneously. Just like the Wave Beam, it has better accuracy of hitting enemies more easily. It's unique, but no joke, I used this beam only for a little bit, then dropped it for this next one. I should mention this before we keep going. Just like the first title, when you get a new beam, it swaps out entirely, so keep that in mind. The Plasma Beam is by far the strongest beam Samus has in her arsenal. This beam will wipe out any enemy in her path with the exception of a slight handful of enemies. It's a really solid beam, but by endgame, unfortunately, it's useless due to the overabundance of Metroids. It's definitely better in later titles. One last thing before I proceed, but this game actually fixed the grinding issue a bit with the introduction of energy and missile stations, meaning when you hit them, it'll refill your energy or missiles to the max. After how grueling things were last game, these stations are a breath of fresh air and I greatly appreciate them. So I'm going to fast forward a bit. You'll keep progressing through and eventually run into Zeta Metroids. At this point, you're pretty deep into SR388 and you don't have too much left. You'll eventually get to the second to last area and come across 3 Omega Metroids. Just try your best and deal with these enemies without wasting too many resources because the closest station to refill is all the way back up here. Good luck! Once you defeat the Omega Metroids, your counter will drop to 1 and you'll finally be able to enter the final area of this game. There are no enemies in this area. There's an energy station, missile recharge station, a save station, and a spot where you can grab the ice beam. Just like before, you better grab it before entering the boss area. It might be a little tricky trying to use the space jump to navigate this area, but with no enemies, you'll have all the free space to practice it. So when you enter the boss area, 8 normal Metroids will appear and your counter will jump right back up to 9. There's not much to say about these variants because they are just as tough as they were in the first Metroid game. Though in this title, they only appear once. Once they are dead, they stay dead. Thankfully. They'll appear every so often leading up to the final boss herself. Now, you find yourself face to face against the Queen Metroid. So before I jump into this, you actually can drop below this floor and pretty much refill all of your resources and save before you take on the Queen Metroid, which is something I highly recommend doing. Only thing that sucks is that you gotta traverse the boss floor all over again, but thankfully, since the Metroids are dead, you won't have anything stopping you from getting back to the Queen. The Queen Metroid is by far the toughest enemy in the game, and rightfully so. She attacks by lunging at you and by shooting acid spit at you frequently. You only have this very little space to work with, so you'll have to mostly play defensively. Thankfully, her acid spit is really slow, so this is easy enough to jump over or crouch under to dodge it. So I'll tell you 2 ways to beat this monster. The first way, y'all already know what I'm about to say. Missile spam to the fucking max, baby! So when you dodge her acid spit, you'll have a tiny window to attack her, which is tedious to say the least. When she lunges at you, she'll sometimes open her mouth. You can shoot in the mouth and she'll be stunned for a little bit. When this happens, you better be fucking mashing missiles like crazy. This will do quite a bit of damage, but just know she has a lot of health, so be prepared. The second option is when she opens her mouth as she lunges at you, shoot a missile inside to stun her. But now this time, when she's stunned, go into morph ball form and jump in. While inside, you can drop a lot of morph bombs, which will deal tremendous damage and is by far the fastest way to kill her. Again, she has a lot of health, so be ready to do this quite a few times at the very least. Her attacks get faster the less health she has, so be very careful and be sure to nail your jumps when dodging. This boss is an endurance test and really tests your abilities of everything you learn to the absolute extreme. I do find her a way more engaging final boss than Mother Brain if I'm being honest. Hell, I barely clutched out the fight and it took me multiple tries to beat her. Once you beat the Queen Metroid, the Metroid counter drops to 0, but not quite. You begin to make your way out and back to your ship until you pull up to an egg. From this egg, a Metroid is born. This is a hatchling of a baby Metroid and is the last of its species, but instead of being a threat, it starts clinging itself to Samus and the hatchling theme begins to play. Honestly, this theme is really soothing and surprisingly a little sad, even with the Game Boy's limitations. Instead of killing it, Samus decides to take the baby Metroid back with her. And honestly, this is a huge turning point for her character. She's always been portrayed as this cold, unflinching bounty hunter, but here, she chooses mercy. Letting the last Metroid live? That's insane growth, not gonna lie. So there's no escape in this game. Instead, it's more so an emotional run back towards the ship. It's very sweet, which feels so odd for a game like this, but I love it a lot. Once you get back to the ship, the game is now over and congratulations, you beat Metroid 2, The Return of Samus. Metroid 2, Return of Samus is definitely a huge step up from the first game. The quality of life improvements mixed with the way Metroids actually evolved this time around give this title a very unique identity. But honestly, I can't in good conscience call it a good game. It's somewhat replayable, sure, but the lack of music and continued absence of a map dragged the experience down for me a lot. That's just my personal take, of course. If you love this game, that's awesome, and I'm genuinely glad you can appreciate it more than I can. I definitely see someone giving this game much higher praise, which is understandable. Going back to the tier list, I'm dropping Metroid 2 into C tier. Next time, we'll cover the title that most people believe to be the start of the golden age of the Metroid series, Super Metroid. Thanks for watching.